All right, just started recording, and let's go back and take a look in here at this. Boop. Okay. So we've got the pre-fader, post-fader. That stuff is super, super important. And as we can hear, they both have the effects on it. So if I pull this down, pull this up. Right, if I move the effects around, right? Okay, so they both have the effects if I do it pre or post. Just one is that you're hearing just the hall effect, just the room when I pull it all the way down. So that's that. Now let's also talk about, let's go back and talk about this whole parallel effect, because what we've been talking about so far has just been serial effects. Parallel was right down here, boop. And so let's go back here and finish that discussion about parallel effects, because we've been talking about serial effects so far, but now I want to talk about parallel effects and put it into a parallel effect. So what I'm going to do here, this is how you would do this in Ableton Live. In Ableton Live, what we would do is, and again, I'm showing you this in Ableton Live because I don't have Pro Tools on this computer yet. That's getting changed even as we speak. I've set that plan in motion, but for now, we're just going to be running on Ableton Live for this, and I'm going to show you how to do it on the paper here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead on here in Ableton Live, and I'm going to rename this track. Let's call this one Dist Effects. Boom. And I'm going to take my distortion effects. I don't like the one with it before, so I'm going to just take this one here and move it over like this. And we're going to do this and not that. This, get rid of this, and go back over here. I do not need this EQ8, so, whoop, don't need the reverb either. Oh yeah. Cool, sounds good. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to make this into a parallel chain here. And so let's just talk about it real quick in Ableton Live, how we do this. And we're also going to talk about how we do it in Pro Tools. So here we go. Up a setting up a parallel effect chain in Ableton Live. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we need to and y'all can hear me, right? We're good. I just kind of dove right in without making sure that everybody is online and looking good. So what we want to do in here is I've got my two channels. I got my A channel here with my original OG sound, as Joanna says. Cool. And then I got this other channel over here, which would be my distorted effects. So here I got my original sound. And in Ableton Live, we can see down here, you've got your I/O section. And then down beneath it, you've got your sends and then down here you get your fader. So that's set up. Now, this isn't really called, I'm saying, oh, sorry, let me make it so y'all can see that. There we go. So it's not really called I/O section. It's actually a little bit different. It's called from and to, and that's an important distinction. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. So here, I'm going to go ahead and move these over like this. And we're going to call this one from. Actually, let's make it like this. From and to, and this is the input, and this is the output, like that. So the original sound is going to be out to the master. Master or main or whatever. And this one here, our sends, is going to have our, like this, A and B. Which I don't need to label them. Here, let's not label them right now. And then we're going to have our effect track. Let's just go ahead and grab this one. There we go. All right, so here's the thing, is that Ableton Live does not have any aux channels at all. Doesn't have any aux channels. So in here, these are both going to be audio tracks. Audio and audio, because they just don't have any such thing as an aux channel. So what we're going to do here is on here, the send is not going to be used. We're going to use or there's no buses or nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our, let's use green. So from is going to be coming from our OG sound. And what this is going to do is it's going to grab some of the signal. So if this is the audio signal is going out, like that, this is going to grab some of the signal and pull it in. Like that. That's how it looks if we were to look at it in Ableton Live. That's basically how it's going to look. So it's going to be, this is going to be post fader. Actually, sorry. Sorry. It depends on what you set here, because you can set pre or post fader here. So let me just show you. I'm going to go in here. Audio from is going to be our drums, or OG drums. Let's call this, instead of OG sound, let's call this an OG sound drum loop. Boom. And here we can set it here to whatever we want. And so in this case here, I want to set this to post effects. So pre-effects is going to be no effects. Post-mixer is fader effects, but fader does not matter. And then post-mixer is fader on OG track. Oh, sorry. I'm writing all this stuff down. Yep, sorry, thank you. Pre-effects, but fader does not matter. And then fader on the OG track changes the level on the effect channel. On the effect channel. Sorry, I'll leave that there for a second so y'all can digest. Okay, so does that make, I hope that makes some kind of sense. And this is how you do it in Ableton Live. But I want to go back and do some review and talk about how you do that in Pro Tools as well. And we're kind of wrapping everything back around to where we started here in the beginning. So let me just show you here before we do that. So here I've got my distorted effects. I'm going to go post mixer here. So now in order to hear them, sorry, not post mixer, sorry, post effects. Now in order to hear them, I turn my monitor to in. Monitor has to be set to in. And you can see, you can hear, we can adjust between these two. Now what I would do in this case is I would put some EQ in here as well to kind of mess around with the EQ. Probably doesn't need to be 4 times. There we go. Yeah. Cool. That's a kind of a cool little sound right there. And you can adjust the level there. Yeah. All right. So that's how you would kind of mess with that. And that's how you'd add this stuff in. So that distortion sound that was like way over the top when we had it directly on the track as an insert effect in serial. Now that we put it as a parallel effect, where as the original sound is the dry sound, it's got some, obviously it's got some compression and EQ and stuff on it, the drum loop that I'm using. And then And what we're doing is we're adding that distortion in there as like a nice little layer. Right, and that's just something you can use to kind of spice things up a little bit. Now, what we want to do is bring that back around to Pro Tools and how we can do this in Pro Tools. So we're going to go over here. Okay, so here's our Pro Tools routing. Pre-fader, post-fader, all this good stuff in here. Let's get another blank page up in here. Move that over to here. There we go. Okay, so who knows how we can do this with Pro Tools routing instead of Ableton Live routing? How can we make this a reality in Pro Tools? Who wants to tell me? Anybody have an answer for me? All right. If you don't, that's totally fine. That's what we are here for. Let's go ahead and paste this in again. Boop. Okay, so I got my 2 tracks. Now, in this case, I forgot a lot about Pro Tools. Well, that's why we're going over it again right now. And we're going to be doing more reviewing in Pro Tools and stuff for the next couple weeks because I don't want y'all to forget Pro Tools before we go into Mod 3. Group, you send and return with sends and returns. Yes. Yeah, I guess you would say it like that. Sure. Yeah. Waiting for the iLock activation from Avid still. Yeah. Apparently, a bunch of us are. You're in good company because me too. Hey. All right. So here is our OG track. And this is our OG. And this is an audio track. And here is our effect track. And this, instead of being an audio track, is, let me put a different color here. Light green. This is our, oh, that's, oh no, I can't. Sorry, I can't use that color. We'll go with blue. This is our effect track. This is an aux track. That's a good name, Lewis. Joanna came up with a good name there, OG. So the OG audio track and the effect track, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to use buses. Remember, to move audio around in Pro Tools, you have to use buses. You've got to use buses. Send the OG signal to a bus on the send and route the effects channel to a bus. To the same bus. Absolutely. You are absolutely correct there. Your legacy. That's all they remember about me. Okay. So in this case here, the output would go to the main out. And actually, you know what? Let's move this around here because I'm going to set up one little more layer of stuff in here. Remember, we're going to do this up here, and let me just condense this down. All right. So we're going to put one more. I'm going to move this over here. We're going to put one more channel in here because I want to show you one more cool thing in Pro Tools. Something I didn't show you in Ableton Live, but we're going to go ahead and do it in Pro Tools. And I don't think we need all these bad boys, do we? Get out of here. You understand what's what, because it's over on the left. So, cool. All right. So as you said, we're going to use a send, and we're going to route the audio to our bus. Let's use purple for this. So we're going to say this one goes to bus 1. And then on the effect channel, we're going to go over here. There you go. And then we're going to go here to my input on my effect channel and go to bus 1. Oop. So now what that's going to do is that's going to take the signal and go from here to here. There you go. Okay, now, in normal world, this is going on to our main. And since we're in Pro Tools, I'm going to say main 1 and 2. And this one is also going to our main 1 and 2. So they're going to our master. All these are going to our masters. But I don't want to route these to the master anymore because what I'm doing is I've got an effect on here. So on here, maybe on this one, I've got, let's see, let's use dark gray. Maybe I have a compressor and I have an EQ on here. But maybe over here on my effect channel, I want to get my distortion or something. So I'm going to go over here, and in here, I'm going to get like a distortion and a filter, same as what I had set up in Ableton Live. So we've got these two things here. Now, what I may want to do, and what I probably want to do, is I want to take these, because what's going to happen is, and you gotta make sure that you're thinking like this. This is a really important way to be thinking about stuff. Is as a producer or a sound engineer, you've got to be thinking in terms of the sound that you're trying, your like destination sound, the sound that you're trying to create. And so when I'm thinking about what effects I'm going to use, I'm always thinking about like, what sound do I want to make? And I actually remember, when I started to finally be able to make the sound that was in my head. It took a long time, but it was really, it was really nice when I could actually finally make the sound that I was hearing in my head. And I had that level of control over my engineering. And that's where you want to get to eventually. You want to get to the point where you're like you hear something, you're like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. But you know what? If I did this to it, it would sound really cool. And you know basically what it's going to sound like. Now, in order to get to that point, you have to do a lot of experimenting. You have to try a lot of new things and never be afraid to kind of keep trying things. But you also have to understand how signal flow works and how to get there with this stuff. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take this. I've got this sound here. I got my OG sound, I got my effect sound, and we made this new sound with it. And even though it's not Pro Tools, we can hear it in Ableton Live. Right? That sound is very different from that sound. You hear that sound. It sounds cool, but right? That's a different sound. It's related. Obviously, it's like connected to the first sound, but it's not the first sound. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to say, okay, instead of running my outputs here to my master 1 and 2 and having both of my original sound and my effect go to outputs 1 and 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to route them to this new aux channel over here that I've got. And this is going to be my sound group. This is also an aux. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the input of this to be bus 3 and 4. And the outputs of these are going to be bus 3 and 4. So everything is going to bus 3 and 4. And now the output of this one is going to go to my master. Now, if I wanted to, I could put some effects on these two here. Let's go ahead and just route them. Let's do the... Boom. And now this one's going to go to my master output. There you go. And now any kind of effects we want to add to the whole thing, we can put right here on here. So for example, if we wanted to add in some EQ overall or whatever, we can do that. Now the cool thing about this is that, and let me just show you this in Ableton Live. If I go in here and let's say, okay, the way I would do this in Ableton Live is I could either take both of these and just group them together. I'll call this one drum loop group. Or I would take these and give them to a new audio channel like that. And set my master to go to my drum loop group. Input here, set that up. Got that there. Now, this reverb that we've got going on in here, hear how that sounds different from this. Or different from this. Wait, stop, sorry. Different from this. Right, or this. Actually, I kind of like that one. Kind of like that one the best. That one gives it some nice depth. You hear how 3D that sounds? That actually sounds really, really cool with a nice big room on there. I mean, medium room. Nice, and we can pull this one. If we go in here in Ableton Live, my aux channel can actually come back into my group. So now, if I turn this down, it affects everything. So that's a really important part about that. Cool. All right, so today we've talked a lot about a lot of this grouping, and this is some very, very deep mix things. Who has, I think now it's time to open it up for some questions. I feel like earlier somebody had asked some questions about something, and I feel like it was... I feel like it's Botto Beats. Is it you? Maybe not. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff? Okay, this is like super, super important. mix points? No? Cool. All right. How did you get the audio in here? I went to these two channels here. When do I use Pro Tools? That's interesting. But I go to these two channels here, and I sent the audio to this channel here, my drum loop group. So the output's here, and then this one here, make sure that it says no input, and then you set the monitor to in. It's a good question. When do I use Pro Tools? I use Pro Tools if I'm on a big project with a lot of moving parts. So if I'm just working, if I'm just working on something on my own, just in my own studio or with my part of the Renegade Masters stuff, then I'm just using Ableton Live. And most of the stuff for Renegade Masters, it's mostly like samples and things like that, or taking my voice and pitching it down. And I'm not doing a lot of, even if I'm using vocals from somewhere else. Here, I'll play you something real quick. Here, let's just hit stop on this. Oops, not that. I'm just going to load it into Ableton Live because it's easier to hear it, right? Let's see, Dropbox. Excuse me. Renegade Master Music. The remixes. Oh no, it's an original track. So for example, this track here is called Brooklyn Boy. And I wrote the lyrics for, I wrote the lyrics for it. Kind of had an idea for what I wanted to do with it. I think, is that how this one came up? No, that's Brooklyn's on the Map. You know what this one was we got the singer in here and just told him to talk about some stuff. I think, I can't remember now. But this one here, turn the warp off. I'll turn the volume down as well. And when I was doing the recording for this, I just had him with a handheld microphone in my studio at my place. Nothing very fancy. And then ran him through a lot of effects. He's got a great voice anyway. And so for this one here, and again, the stuff I do, I don't really use. If I'm just doing this stuff, I'll just use Ableton Live from start to finish, everything, including the mastering. For this one, I did the mastering myself as well, and just did everything from start to finish with Ableton Live. But if I am doing, where are we? This one here. If I'm doing more of the Signal Falls stuff, where it's like singing that matters, I mean, not that singing doesn't matter, but if it's like singing that's like complex and there's a lot going on, for example, this one, which is a cover of Born Slippy from Underworld. This one's layers and 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 layers of vocals. So this one I recorded into Pro Tools because I need to do a lot of comping and a lot of extra tracks.
Drive boy, dog boy, dirty, numb angel boy in the doorway, boy. She was a lipstick boy, she was a beautiful boy, and tears, boy, and all in your inner space, boy. You had handgirls, boy, and steel, boy.
And to get the sound of her singing straight with hardly any breaths is a lot of comping of multiple takes.
Come over, she smiled at you, boy. You let your feelings slip, boy, but never your mask, boy. Random blonde, bio high density, rhythm blonde, boy.
And so you can hear in here, you can hear all the layers of the vocals in there, even me singing in there. Ugh.
You real boy, speak to me, and boy, dog, dirty, non-cracking, boy. You get wet, boy, big time, boy. Acid bear, boy. Babes and babes and babes and babes and babes, and remembering nothing, boy. You like my tin horn, boy. You get wet like an angel, derail.
So to get something like that going in Pro Tools, in Ableton Live with that level of comping and playlists and stuff, you really need the playlists from Pro Tools. So if I'm doing this kind of stuff, then I'll use Pro Tools. I swear by Pro Tools. But if I'm just making beats and I'm not doing a lot of vocal stuff, I'll use Ableton Live. If I'm recording a band and I'm mixing a band, which is not something I do. I've done it like once or twice in my life. And it's never been my job description. I've never wanted it to be my job description. It was never something that I was super interested in coming up. But if I were to be doing that, then I would be using Pro Tools. If I was doing a lot of stuff with film, and I don't mean scoring for film. I mean if I was doing a lot of ADR and mixing for film and recording the instruments like orchestras and stuff like that, I would be using Pro Tools. If I was for scoring for film, I would probably, that would be a hard one, because for scoring it'd be a lot of production and stuff like that, because whatever I do would have a lot of electronics in it. But I would probably start it off in Ableton Live, and I'd probably call up a good friend of mine who does a lot of work in Logic and do a lot of stuff in Logic with him, just because, and Pro Tools does this as well, but Logic is just the one that I know better for this, and that is classical notation. Ableton Live doesn't output to classical notation at all, although what I probably would do is I would use Ableton Live and then export the MIDI, and then the MIDI tracks, I'd bring them into Logic or Pro Tools, and then get a score there for that. But does that help answer your question, Lewis? I think maybe, hopefully. But yes, cool, yeah. Y'all have only seen me use Ableton Live. I use Pro Tools all the time when I'm teaching in class in the first part when we're talking about Pro Tools. But I've come in, I came in halfway through the module here because of Todd. Well, you don't know this, but Todd left. He was the teacher who was teaching my class or teaching this class, and he left for another job. So I came in to take his place, and I think you were there in the first couple of days when I was talking about being in Thailand and stuff. So I am an expert with Pro Tools. I used Pro Tools from 1999, like all the time, until 2008, which is when that second album with one of these bands came out. And then I used Ableton, and then I changed over to do my production almost exclusively on Ableton Live. And one of the reasons why I did that was because a good friend of mine was doing all his productions in Ableton Live. And I was just like, well, if you can make it sound like that, then obviously it doesn't matter what you use. And I'm a big believer in that. It doesn't matter what you use. But I think that because y'all are, you're going to school for being engineers, Pro Tools is what you need to learn how to use. Ableton Live is fun and it's really cool, and for producing and making beats and stuff like that, Ableton Live is great. But for recording, engineering, mixing, all those things, if you're doing it for other people, I really believe that you should be doing it in Pro Tools. Or Logic is fine too, but Pro Tools is like, you need to learn it because it's in every single studio. So, cool. All right, so let's take a break. Here, let me go ahead and stop the recording. Stop recording now.